Hi everyone, welcome back to another Photos Go video. This channel is where we discuss and learn new skills around the topic of design and development. If you want to grow your skills and learn new things that's coming up, please like, share, and please do subscribe for more. In this video, we'll be learning and discussing how we can build an application using modern React Redux with Redux Toolkit. If you want to jump to a specific part of the video, please feel free to click on the timestamp added in the description down below. Okay, so there are dozens of state management libraries out there which we can choose from today. But in this tutorial, we'll be focusing on how we can become familiar with the Redux Toolkit. So I assume you have a basic familiarity with Redux concept beforehand. And if you are totally new to Redux, I recommend you to check out my beginner's Redux course here in my channel, and here it comes to your right. After you have gained a basic concepts about Redux and how it works, will be good enough to move forward learning more about Redux Toolkit. The core packages of Redux are the same in Redux Toolkit, but the way we implement things has changed a bit. With a package called Redux Toolkit, now we can implement Redux in our React application in the dead simple, easiest way possible. We'll take that look as we move along with the video. So let's quickly also take a look at what we'll be building right now. So we'll be building this particular simple application. As we can see here, it's a note-taking application. And currently, we don't have any data yet. So there is no notes. So let's go ahead and add some notes. And for the heading and description, I'll just go ahead and add some gibberish right now. So add my notes, and we can see here our notes has been populated inside of our list here. And I can further delete the note, but for now I'll just go ahead and edit this. I'll change this to 1111 and add a note, and as we can see here, our notes has been successfully edited as well. So we can further delete it, or even hit a refresh, and we will see that notes being disappeared. So behind the scene, we are making the use of Redux Toolkit, but we are using just hard-coded objects inside of our state, not calling or making calls to an external API. But definitely we'll be also be covering how we can make the use of asynchronous actions inside of Redux Toolkit as well, which will be a bonus content in this video. So let's go ahead and understand a bit about how Redux works behind the scene. So in this diagram, what we can see here is how Redux work behind the scene. So I'm using FigJam, which is pretty much great tool that you can like together brainstorm with and draw something inside of Canvas and discuss with the team and some other people. So yeah, let's come to the point. So we have something called store. So store is a place where our state lives, and state is nothing but the variable which are used all across the application. So store, right? And the view is what users see. So I'll just draw it. So view is what users see, and it's just an interface, let's say. So we have some kind of interface here, and the actions are what users click on. For example, we have a button here which says add, and if a user clicks on this particular add button there, then they trigger an action, and that particular action, or in other words, it dispatches an action. And after the action has been dispatched, it calls a particular reducer. For example, we have this add button inside of our UI, or a subtract button inside of our UI. So if I click on add button inside of a UI, it calls the reducer for the add. So it adds the state, or it does the addition function defined inside of a reducer. So it calls the addition, and if we click on the minus or the subtraction inside of our view that the user sees, it dispatches the minus action or the subtraction action, and it calls the subtraction reducer. In terms of addition, we dispatch an addition action or an add action, and it calls the reducer with the add action. And after the reducer is being called, it updates the store. And after the store has been updated, where our all the global variables live, and we update the variables and the value of it, and we can see the changes inside of our UI here, which is the view. So behind the scene, this is how a Redux simply works. So in Redux, we have a thing called store, reducer, and actions. And view is just an interface that we see. And here we can see the action that is being pressed by the user, which is the plus button. And they also contain the information that you want to add to the state known as payload. For example, I want to add a value. For example, we have 1 as our initial state, right? 1 as our initial state. Init, let's call it init. It's just a key value appears for now, init and j1. So for example, we have something inside of let's say it's inside of an object, init of 1. If we want to add like a value inside of this init, we can add we can throw in, or we can like add a payload inside of the dispatch action, which is like 2. We can pass it 2, right? 2 as a payload. So it grabs or it takes into consideration about the 2, and it calls the reducer and updates the store with the value, and we can see the inside of view we can see 3. So because it has taken a payload of 2 and initial it has a value of 1, so that's why we can see 3 inside of our view, inside of our interface. So this is how generally Redux works. So talking about the Redux Toolkit, let's close this one for now. And talking about the Redux Toolkit, let's get it started. And we can configure it in a couple of ways, which we'll be talking about how we can configure our Redux Toolkit. But it has the following architecture and dependencies that come along with the Redux Toolkit. So the generally dependencies that come along with this Redux Toolkit package are Redux, first of all, for state management. Second, reselect for selecting a slice out of global state. Third, immer for handling immutability inside of our stores. Before, if we have used Redux before, we should need to consider about how we can split the objects or split an array, and like make a copy of array, so that we are not directly mutating the state itself. So it's not recommended to directly mutate the state in Redux, but inside of Redux Toolkit we had something called immer, and we can just write immer and see how like it's a library which helps us to mutate the state directly, so that behind the scene it makes a copy of state itself, so that we can like mutate the state directly as well. So yeah, this is the package that behind the scene Redux Toolkit uses. So and the next thing is Redux Saga. And Redux Saga is generally used for asynchronous tasks that require some time to to occur, or in a sense is asynchronous, and it awaits for some value to be returned, and it takes some time. For example, calling an API, or getting a response from an API. So it takes some seconds, some time. So it also provides the automatic support for Redux DevTools extension, and also for Immer.js library, which is a great tool to deal with immutable objects. And we also can use a various predefined functions of Redux Toolkit, which is not only speeds up the process but also saves our time. Now let's dive into some concepts of how we can use Redux Toolkit. So inside of our documentation right here, here are a couple of ways how we can scaffold our Redux Toolkit app. But before we begin there, let's grab in some what's included inside of like Redux Toolkit. Before we talk about what like dependencies it use behind the scene, but now we are talking about what included in Redux Toolkit. So talking about what's included inside of Redux Toolkit, as you can see here, let's zoom a little bit so that you guys can see it. So first thing is configure store. So configure store is a function which provides automatically support for Redux Tunk, Redux dev tool extension, and also passes the default middleware. And the next is create reducer, which provides a support for immer library, and that allows writing the immutable code mutably. So, and the next thing is create actions, which generates an action creator, and we can give it a type of string, and it can be used as in place of type constant. So we pretty much defined like types before, like inside of our what type of action that we want to dispatch, and we uh, can use in place of a type constant for like create actions, which returns an action creator function, and uh, slice create slice a create slice function that comes in handy to replace create action and create reducer function with a single function, and create asynchronous dunk that takes Redux strings as an argument and generally returns a promise. And create entity adapter. This is a topic that we won't be diving into in this video, but definitely like write a comment down that we want to learn this stuff. So I will also try to make some better videos on like topics around create entity adapter. And also create selector is just it comes from the utility reselect library, which specifically selects and specific objects, or in a sense specific state inside of our seed, which can be done by create selector function. So after all of these that we understood, we can further move ahead with how we can get started with our Redux Toolkit. So there are a couple of ways that we can get started with the Redux Toolkit. You can use Redux Toolkit inside of our Redux project and refactor everything into Redux Toolkit, or you can also go with npm install Redux Toolkit. But in this video, we'll be using a pre-made template of Redux Toolkit so that we don't have to configure everything from scratch. So I'll go ahead and add this particular thing or command inside of our VS Code. To get started with Redux Toolkit, we have a couple of ways that we can get started with Redux Toolkit. The first thing is we can obviously use npm install Redux Toolkit to install Redux Toolkit as a dependency inside of our existing project, or create some project from scratch with this command, as you can see here, which configures it with Redux. And let's grab this command and paste it inside of our VS Code here. So after adding this particular command inside of our VS Code, which I have already done, and we should see this package.json file. But inside that package.json file, we won't be like grabbing Redux Toolkit. So I've also installed Redux Toolkit with npm I, this particular text which is highlighted, and I've also added React Redux as well, which didn't include it in that command that we generally copied right now. After everything that we need has been like installed, we'll go ahead and spin up everything inside of our browser with npm start. So it's locally serving our files in 3000. And if we go to our Redux extension that I've already added and click on something, then we can see here our counter name of our slice, which is counter, and the increment action is being dispatched. And we can see here the value is 1 now. And if we add 3 here, we must see 4 in this amount, right? And let's click on add amount. And after clicking on add amount, increment by amount has been dispatched, which is the counter slice, and the amount is changed to 4. So everything is working well. So let's go ahead and understand a bit inside of our code here. So inside of our code here, we can see a features folder here. And inside of feature folder, we are interested in counter slice and counter.js for now. And inside of counter slice, we have imported create slice, which helps us to create a new slice. And create slice is a function which takes in an object. So inside that object, it takes in reducer, the name of the slice, and the initial state. And inside of reducers, we have increment, decrement, and increment by amount, which are reducers. So we don't have to define any reducers, which is great. So increment, decrement, and increment by amount is reducer in itself. So we don't have to define a different case as we did for previous old Redux projects. And definitely we will obviously be going through each of these. So these are some reducers which are defined: increment, decrement, and increment by amount, which we already saw that inside of our here increment by amount and decrement, which is this specific reducer that has been dispatched. And extra reducers is the function that provided or available to us when we create some asynchronous action. As you can see here in the comments, the extra reducers field lets the slice handle actions defined elsewhere, including actions generated by create async thunk or in other slices. So we have this called add slice or add cases, which is faking the asynchronous action. And we are obviously importing fetch count, also defined here, which waits for the return value of fetch count and passing the amount as a parameter, and we return the response the data later on. So if we take a look at fetch count, so I think it's inside of counter API. So let's go inside of fetch count. So inside of our fetch count here, we are faking the asynchronous action with a delay of 500 millisecond. All right. So with this understanding, we will dive in to create our new feature. So we will create a new folder here and call it notes. So inside of notes, we will replicate this same folder structure. So we'll create notes.js, and also we'll create notes slice.js. So let's start with notes slice. So inside of node slice, first of all, we need to import create slice from Redux Toolkit. After importing our create slice from our Redux Toolkit, we will need to initialize our state. So first of all, our initial state would be an empty array. And after initializing state, we will create a constant and export that particular constant, which makes a use of create slice function. And inside this create slice function, we can pass in an object with name, initial state, and reducers. So let's go inside of reducers and let's create some reducers that's necessary for us. So inside of our node slice here, the first reducer that we'll be making is adding nodes. So adding nodes takes in state and payload, and we have destructure state and action actually, and we have a destructure payload from action.payload. Similarly, we did for like action.payload, we just destructure payload. And this is, as we can see here, we have state.push and payload, which seems to be like we are mediating the state directly, but it's not. We can eventually like do anything that we want in a mutable way, because behind the scene it uses immer. All right, so let's go ahead and define our delete node as well. So delete node will obviously takes the same state and actions, and we destructure payload inside of that action, and we return state.filter with an ID, and we'll check whether it's not equal to the payload, and we will return that particular object and inside of this particular array. And lastly, we will also grab in edit nodes and like paste in the edit nodes function. So edit nodes function is also same, which takes in state and action, but we haven't destructured payload here. But you can obviously, but the state is state.map the nodes array, and as we can see here, we have this name, which is nodes, and we just map through that nodes, and we will return ID, heading, and subheading of this particular payload. Else we will just return the nodes with the spreaded nodes here, and lastly we return the state here. So after everything is done, let's export select nodes. Select nodes is a constant that we created, which monitors the state, and it's state.nodes. Everything that we have inside of our state can be referenced with select nodes now, so that we don't have to inside of our components, we don't have to write state.nodes, 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 but reference just state.nodes inside of node slice to take a reference of that particular state that we want. And lastly, we want to export to constant, where we will be exporting these defined reducers, which is add nodes, delete nodes, and edit nodes, and which would be node slice actions that we created, and eventually export node slice reducer after all. So after this has been done, we will save it and go to nodes.js. So inside of our nodes.js, there are a couple of things that we need to make. So inside of here, firstly, we will want to make the use of React functional component. I'll just write RFC, and it should RCF. I think it's RFC, React functional components. Let's see. Okay, it's RSF. I don't know, it should be RFC, but anyway, React stateless component. After we added this function, we will export, let's delete this. We will refactor a bit. So let's call it export function and call it nodes. And inside here, we will eventually be importing our everything that we need. The first thing that we'll be importing is use dispatch and use selector. Use dispatch is used for dispatching events inside of our components or anywhere that we want to dispatch events. And use selector is reference to this particular thing that we will be like selecting a particular thing inside of our state with use selector. After these things has been imported, we will also be importing the exports from our node slice, which is select nodes and delete nodes, which has been imported here, which is this select nodes and delete nodes. And edit nodes, I will come to this later on. So after this thing has been done, let's go ahead and import our or make a constant here. First of all, the constant that we made is we made the use of use selector and selected nodes, and we assign to a constant called nodes that we want to take a reference of this, that particular nodes inside of our state that updates to that particular state, and obviously make the use of dispatch. So I will, behind the scene, I will just go ahead and add Tailwind. And I don't want to just dive into Tailwind, but I'll just go ahead and add Tailwind to our project and create a simple form here. So I've just added some basic forms inside of our notes here, inside of our features, notes.js. And to take a look at it visually, we must need to import it inside of our app.js, or let's make a router.js file. So inside of our src, we will create a new folder and call it routes. And inside of routes, we will define routes for our application and call it routes.js. So inside of our routes.js, we will define some routes that's needed. First of all, we will import React from React. And obviously, we do want to make the use of these browser router, and switch route from React router DOM. And after this has been added, let's also go ahead and import notes that we just created, which is this particular thing, which is notes from features, notes and notes. And after that has been done, we will also create a constant and call it route. And inside that, we will import our route here. So inside our path, which is home path, we will import this particular component, in a sense where we created this node, right? So we are importing it and adding it inside of this path here. So after this has been done, let's save it. I think we haven't really installed React Router DOM. So we will install React Router DOM. So for the installation of React Router DOM, we can hit on command npm I, and here should be space here. So let's hit enter. After installing this, we should see some changes inside of our UI. So it's spinning up our localhost 3000, and we really don't see anything, but I guess we haven't imported that particular thing inside of our app.js, right? So inside of our app.js, we will just add routes. So I will replace it with this. So where we have the route, where it's pointing to route. So I think it's inside routes, and this is routes as well, but it should be just route. Here we have our interface, but we have some issues here. So it says field rule for SVGs and class name, clip rule, class name. So let's go ahead and fix this. So inside of our notes here, really haven't used these two things. So for now, let's comment it out. And inside of our notes, we have this return right here, which should be we should not be reflecting there, but it's reflecting as it's return here. So there was a return keyword between these templates right here. So I'll just remove it, and everything looks visually fine. So let's go ahead and add the dynamic in a sense where we will just add a value for this subheading and heading. And also we need a different route for add notes as well. So for adding this dynamic thing inside of here, let's go to our app. So we do have these notes, and which take a reference to the selected notes from node slice, and we haven't really made the use of delete notes yet, but we can grab this note, and we can obviously loop it down for our heading and subheading, where we will be obviously adding this inside here. So we can create template or JSX here and write if its notes dot length is greater than 0, then we will render this thing. If not, we will render this thing inside of let's grab everything inside of this and cut it out and paste it inside here. And let's add also a fragment for this one. If there is, the length is not like that, which is not greater than 0, we'll add this inside of this fragment here. And let's hit format and hit the save. And as you can see here, we have no data here because we don't have any data inside of our state, which is this should not be a counter. I think it should be a counter because we do have a counter state as well. So let's go ahead and remove that counter state inside of our app, which is inside here. And we don't have any notes state yet because we haven't really imported notes inside of our store yet. So we will go ahead and import our note reducer rather than counter reducer, which comes with a boilerplate. And we will definitely make the use of our notes reducer inside of our export constant here. And let's hit save. And after this has been done, we should see some state, which is notes, which is an empty array, which comes from this particular note slice here, which is initial state of an empty array. And we are okay for now, and we are doing great. So now let's go ahead and move ahead with our other things that we need. So inside of our notes, we have no data here. For example, if we go inside of our notes slice and add some data, for example, ID is 1, and hit the save, you should see ID of 1 inside of our state, which is right here. So everything is working fine. So for now, we just have an empty array. So let's go to our notes, and inside of notes we will need some other stuffs, like we will eventually need a dispatch event, or we will also need to add a dynamic fields inside of our headings here. So to add a dynamic fields inside of our heading here, we need to map the notes array we see here, which is an empty array, which was an empty array before, but we just added the ID. So it's an empty array. And for that one, I will just grab everything that's needed, just map it down inside of our notes here. So from here to here, I will just remove this one and replace it with, which generally basically we just made a reference to this notes, which points to the use selector select notes, and which is inside of that slice. And we map the notes with n, and we grab the n.id and add it as a key, and n.heading, if there is no heading, we will display no heading, and n.subheading, if there's no subheading, we will display no subheading. And obviously we also added the link which to note edit, which will be definitely be writing inside of our route here. We will make our route for note edit. And let's also go ahead and add some routes there inside for our note edit. Before that, I would like to add notes add. So for make the use of notes add, we need to make some forms. So to navigate note add, we need to add a router. So that would be like to go to notes add, and I will just add a link here and close that link, wrapping this particular button here, which could be link. And after adding that one, we should see in our interface here, but we don't have any data yet. But anyway, we will just go to routes, and inside that route we will first create a new slice, I guess. So let's create a new slice with a new folder and call it notes add. So inside of notes add, let's add, and inside of notes add.js, we will, this should be, so inside of our notes add.js, we will create a form with the help of Tailwind CSS. So I'll just add forms to our notes. So I have just added some styles with Tailwind CSS for our forms, which is add a new notes form. And after adding some styles, we pretty much need some imports here. So let's import some imports that we need, and I want to grab in some bunch of imports that we need. So we will be using use dispatch from React Redux to dispatch any events from this particular file or this particular component, let's say, or features. And use selector to select a specific store, and then add nodes to add a node, select nodes to select the nodes from use selector, and use history to programmatically redirect our routes as we need. So I'll just also add the nodes state, which can be accessed via use selector select nodes, and which with this, our node state has been accessed to this particular feature. And I will also grab in some states that we need for heading and subheading, because we need to maintain our state for our heading and subheading. So heading, set heading, subheading, and set subheading, which maintains our state inside of this particular file. And also dispatch to dispatch an event, and history to programmatically redirect our routes. So after importing everything there, we will now go ahead and create our onChange handler and value for our inputs. So inside of heading, we will go inside of this input field, and I want to replace this value with a different one, which would be the value of heading. And if we just changed anything, we will set heading to everything we have in this value, which is event.target.value. So we have made the use of heading and set heading. Now let's make the use of subheading and set subheading. So for adding this, I will just remove this one, and we will be switching to this dynamic value. So a value would be subheading, and if anything changed inside of this text area, we will set subheading to the event.target.value. After that has been done, I will also create an onSubmit handler for our buttons, because we want to submit this particular form that we have. So onSubmit handler will, onClick handler will trigger this particular function that we haven't created yet, but we will be adding this function as well. We'll be invoking onSubmit. The onSubmit function would event.prevent default to prevent from browser reloading, and we need to place our values inside of this object here with an ID, which would be just a random ID, not a database generated ID for now. So node state.length. So node state is the state that we have, and we are taking a reference of node state here, and node state.length plus 1, and heading is the value of heading, and subheading is the value of subheading. And ultimately, after that's done, we'll dispatch an action called add nodes, which will take in data as a parameter or a payload to add nodes. And we will finally history.push to our home route. So after that has been done, we will also need to add a nodes add to our store here. So let's go to our store here. So inside of nodes, I think we don't need to for now. Let's get rid of this for now. Let's go ahead and see it what we have in the browser. Let's go to add nodes, and inside of add nodes we don't see anything because our routes are not configured well, I assume. Probably, yeah. So let's make a change inside of our routes here. So routes for our nodes add need to be imported here. So nodes add will be inside a different route. So So we will create a different route for our notes ad, and we will give it a name of notes ad. Use state is not defined. Let's see, notes ad, and notes ad. I guess we have forgot to import use state here, so let's import use state here as well. Use state, and hit save, and everything looks fine now, and everything is error free. Okay, so after that has been done, let's go ahead and add some headings. And after we click this, we are redirected to this page with this populated inside of list, which is working as expected, but we have this SVG issues here. So we'll be these are minor issues, so we'll be figuring it out sooner. So after a note has been added, we definitely need a last thing, which is notes edit. So to make notes edit, I will also create a new folder inside here. So let's add notes edit, and inside node edit we will create a file and call it notes edit.js, and inside of our notes edit here we will grab in everything that we have here. So I will just simply go through each of these because typing it out will consume a lot of time. So I'm just copying and pasting and step by step explaining stuff for those of you who want to learn. So inside here we imported use dispatch, use selector, and edit notes, and use params to make the track of what are we clicking. So it will make us accessible, or we will be accessed with the parameters passed into that route with use params, and use history to like programmatically redirect our routes. So after that has been done, I created a constant which note edit, which doesn't really make the use of props, but I'm just adding underscore here because we haven't used that. So I'm destructuring ID from use params, which can be accessed with from use params itself, and dispatch from use dispatch, and history from use history. And first of all, what I'm doing is after we enter this route, we execute use effect hook, which will select set selected nodes to this particular thing. Set selected nodes, and set selected nodes. The set selected nodes is node detail ID. So node detail ID is the ID that we find it from the nodes state, which is from the nodes state.nodes.find, and we are finding that particular ID inside of our store there and returning that particular node, which returns a specific node of the ID that we are visiting. So after that has been done, we will create a constant select node and set selected node, and obviously we will make the use of this when we change anything inside of our text field. And set selected nodes will be triggered when we enter this route with this, and handle on change will be triggered when we change any inputs. So yeah, and on submit handler will dispatch an event called edit nodes, which takes in the payload of an object, which consists of ID, as you can see here, ID, heading, and subheading, and ultimately history.push will push it to a home route. And yeah, so the value would be selected nodes.heading, because selected nodes is an object and we are getting everything inside that object. So as you can see here, selected nodes is an object with we are getting everything inside of there. And if we change anything inside of this input field, we will trigger on handle on change with the heading and the value passed in. So handle on change will be triggered in this text area and also this input field, and it will take in key and value, and it will spread the old selected nodes with a new key and value that we have. So the key is the same thing that we have here, which is, let's see, which is this one, subheading, and is the key, which matches to this thing, which is heading and subheading, which is a key for this one as well. And after that has been done, we will finally, after clicking on submit, we will like trigger a function where we will dispatch an action of edit nodes and ultimately push the router. So after this has been done, let's go ahead and add this particular stuff inside of our routes. So inside of our routes, let's see, we need to add some of the routes that need it. So first would be nodes edit. So let's grab nodes edit and import it here. So after nodes edit has been imported, we will definitely need to create a route for our edit as well. And we will create a route and call it node edit, and we will have this ID, which will be grabbing from use params hook. And yeah, basically this is it. And let's hit a refresh. We still have this, and this is minor issues that we have. Let's type some gibberish right now. And this is clip rule, this is SVG errors, so we are not naming our SVGs. Let's hit on edit, and as you can see here, nodes edit 1, and this one is accessed with use params hook. So we just remove everything here and add my node, and it successfully changes here as well, and we can delete a node as well. So everything is pretty much working fine as expected. Now let's go ahead and explore some of the asynchronous action that we can deal with inside of Redux Toolkit. So to deal with some asynchronous action inside of our Redux Toolkit, I will create a new folder inside of our features here and call it posts. So inside posts, we have new files here, which is post.js, which should be a camel case. And we need to add another file and call it post slice.js. And inside of our post slice.js, I will firstly import everything that we need, which is create slice and create async thunk. So create async thunk, we haven't used it before, but basically it just helps us to create some asynchronous action inside of our store, and we'll create a constant named getPost, which makes the use of create async thunk, and we'll pass in the route, which is post getPost, and a callback function to this, which will just wait for our JSON placeholder endpoint to return some data, and we are returning some posts from that endpoint. So after that has been done, let's create another constant and call it post slice, and give it a name of posts, and this particular function takes in a couple of key value pairs here, and initial state with the posts, which is initially null. The initial state is null, and we will have these extra reducers available to us if we make the use of create async thunk. And inside our extra reducers here, we can track whether our action is pending, fulfilled, or rejected. So we have getPost.pending, getPost.fulfilled, getPost.rejected, and basically we are setting the state that we have as per the pending, fulfilled, and rejected that we have. So after that has been done, let's export everything that we have created. So we are exporting post_slice.reducer and selected nodes, which tracks in the current post that we have inside of our store. So let's hit a save. After that has been done, let's go to posts. So inside post, I'll grab some imports that we need primarily. So we'll be importing React, obviously, and use effect hook, use dispatch hook, and use selector hook, and also be importing get posts and set, selected nodes from post slice. So inside of our post here, I will also grab everything that we need, which would be constant of posts. Yeah, okay. So we created constant and called post, and we made the use of use dispatch and use selector. And post state is everything we have it inside of our store, with which is referenced from use selector and past select nodes. And we create an use effect hook and dispatched a get post when we enter this particular route, but we haven't defined our this particular route of posts inside of routes. And after we dispatch this particular get post, it would definitely grab in some data from JSON placeholder and simply populate it inside of our template JSX right here. And we obviously have post state dot post dot map, and we are mapping everything inside of our state and printing or just printing it out with post dot title, post dot body. And definitely we also have access to status from post state. Post state dot status is loading, then we show a loading state. So after that has been done, eventually we export this post constant we created. And let's go to our route here, and let's also add in some routes for our posts so that we can see our data that has been added. So inside of here, I will import posts and also add a route for our post here so that we can see our data populated inside of our UI. And let's hit save. And if we visit our post route, it should work. And it throws in error, can access the property status, post state is undefined. Let's take a look at what we have. Post state is undefined. Probably we have made some mistakes here. So I'll just scan through the code, what's wrong, and I'll figure out what's wrong. So basically we haven't really defined our reducers inside of our main store.js. So inside here we need to import post reducer and call it like posts and give it this post that we have with this key value pairs. And if we take a look at this particular route, then we should see some data. And as we can see here, we do have some loading state here as well, which is very much visible for a couple of milliseconds. And here we have some data that we need. So this is how we can create some basic application using Redux Toolkit. So guys, Redux Toolkit is beneficial to all the Redux users and it's simple to use. It can be added as an internal part of the project at the start, or can be added during the internal upgrade of the existing one. You should have some basic idea of how to handle the change of the state immutability, and know what is happening under the hood before migrating to Redux Toolkit. So if you guys want to learn more about design and development skills, please like, share, and subscribe with a click down below. And also please join our growing Discord community server added in the description as well. Thanks a lot, guys. See you in the next one.